Well, thanks for clicking on to the Sunday edition of Vogan's North American Outlook. We've got some big changes coming up over the next 7 to 10 days, folks, across the not only the United States but here across western parts of Europe as well, as the pattern is now starting to shape up the way I've been thinking now for the past couple of months now, and it looks as if the eastern half of the country, where we've seen a lot of warm weather, very warm weather, in fact, across particularly the very early part of October. We've seen temperatures of 90 degrees in such areas as Baltimore, Maryland. But it looks as if we are going to start to see that PNA turn around. So yes, we've had a negative NAO and AO over the past wee while. It went positive, it's going back into the negative again, but yet we didn't see that cool signal over the eastern half of the country that you would expect with that negative NAO. Now, speaking of these indices, you can see here the Arctic oscillation go back into negative once again. What does that mean? It means to say that high pressure is going to build over the Arctic region, over the pole. And as it does so, it then allows the cold air that's been building with that strong polar vortex, it then releases it down into the mid-latitude region. Therefore, you want to see that negative NAO, but very importantly, you want to see the PNA. So if you're wanting cold in the east of the United States, you want to see that PNA going positive. And that has been the key here, folks. Yes, you can see here that at the end of September, early part of October, we did see, in fact, it was trending back towards positive as we entered the month of October. But you notice here that despite the negative NAO, the negative AO, you had a negative PNA signal. So that held the trough over the western half of the country. And of course, we're seeing two storms. This upcoming week will be three storms for the west. Snowfall across the Rockies of Colorado and Wyoming. And this time around, of course, we've seen 58 inches of snow, which was a South Dakota record back in the previous storm, not the storm that just passed, but this the first storm produced upwards of 4 feet of snow in South Dakota. Of course, we've seen heavy rainfall in the last storm, but this upcoming storm this week will produce more snowfall again, as that system looks colder. And the reason being is the fact that the Arctic oscillation is going back into the negative territory. So these systems that push into the west, cross the Rockies, deepen as they enter the plain states because they tap that warmth and that humid air from the Gulf. It will tap colder air. So therefore, you would be expecting a few inches of snow in Rapid City, and up into the Black Hills. We could be talking about another foot of snow potentially with the next system. But the PNA has been predominantly negative, so therefore we've seen more of a western trough as opposed to a ridge. So therefore it held generally that ridge over the eastern half of the country. But because this negative NAO is going back into the tank, very sharply into the tank, you notice that the PNA looks as if it's going towards the positive, and we're going to see that result over the country in the coming days and the coming weeks as well. Now, the upcoming system, you can see here by tomorrow, this is off the GFS, and that system is now starting to wind up. Of course, we've seen some big rains over Texas, much needed rains. Of course, we've got a drought here at the moment. But you can see here by the time we go out to Tuesday, there's the system, crosses into the plain states, taps that warmth and humid air from the Gulf. And of course, the colder air is wrapping in on the north side. So it's going to really wind this system up. And therefore, we'll be talking about some heavy snow across the Black Hills, Wyoming, Colorado. We'll be talking about bigger snow as to what we've seen in the previous system. By the time we get out to Wednesday here, the system is now pushing through the Great Lakes region. So on the back side of that, folks, we are going to see some very cold air. In fact, the coldest air of the year, of the season so far. Of course, it's still early, but it looks as if we're going to see those temperatures drop off to the coldest levels so far this autumn. As for the 850 millibar temperatures, this is off the ECMWF by 144 hours, which is Saturday. The system, of course, is kicking off in the Canada, and on the back side of it, we've got some 0 Celsius air reaching all the way down into Texas, and the minus 10 Celsius line dropping into North Dakota. So certainly it is going to be some very cool weather to come at the end of the week, into the next weekend. As for the GFS, this is the the same period. So this is 144 hours, and you can see here that we've got some very cold air over northwestern Ontario. And that -10 line, you notice here, is starting to creep. The GFS is actually colder than the ECMWF, and it looks as if it's bringing that cold air further east. Rather than being driven further south, the GFS has this tendency to want to take it further east, and therefore you would expect to see colder weather down into the Ohio Valley and eventually the northeast as well. By the time we get out to 168, which is next Sunday, some very cold air coming down. You wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about lake effect snow. Yes, snow over the areas downwind of the Great Lakes, because we're going to have, you notice here these isobars showing fairly brisk winds in the 5,000 foot level, and of course those temperatures are going to be plenty conducive. The warm waters of the Great Lakes as well. Wouldn't be surprised if you see some decent snowfall here downwind of Michigan, Superior, Erie, and of course Ontario as well by the time we get out to next weekend. By the time we get out to Monday, which is 192 hours, we've got the cold air getting all the way into New York City and Boston, so don't be surprised if we start to talk about frost developing in such areas as Central Park. I wouldn't be surprised, folks, if it gets close to maybe 33, 34 degrees at Central Park if this trough does manage to get into the northeast. But you notice here a much, much colder trend starting to show up here, indicative of the indices. Certainly this has been something I've been talking about for some time now. The pattern has been blocking, but the block has not been set up in the right place. We've had, of course, that trough over the west. That sets the whole system out of whack. We had, of course, a blocking high over Hudson Bay, which really kept the eastern half of the country warmer, while we had that trough. There was negative heights further west, so that just doesn't bode well with cold weather over the eastern half of the country. As for snowfall, the GFS by 72 hours is showing some snow across parts of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and yes, into South Dakota as well. I think some of these areas could pick up 2 feet of snow above 6,000 or 7,000 feet. By the time we get out to Friday, which is 120 hours, interestingly enough, that trough is getting driven further south and east. So we're watching about snow potential up over northern parts of Minnesota. And finally, by the time we get out to 168, notice here that the model is picking up on snow, not only in Minnesota, but Wisconsin, a large area of lower Michigan, and yes, even the parts of upstate New York as well is picking up on some snow. I wouldn't be surprised if the model's picking up on some lake effect snowfall by next weekend. So very interesting times to come, colder weather to come. Be sure to check up the write-up on markvoganweather.com if you don't subscribe already. Give it a chance. I look at a lot of things, not only just on the models, but I've got my own theories and water temperatures and, of course, the low solar cycle at the moment. A lot of indication. We're watching the trend. I keep telling my subscribers to watch the trend, not only in the NAO, the AO, and the PNA, which is now starting to go negative, by the way, but we're looking at a lot of different aspects that suggest not only going by the long range models, which have been all over the place. Like, if you do follow the models, if you do look at them every day, they've been up and down in terms of the winter scenario, but there's telltale signs starting to show, folks, that the colder weather is on the way. It will bounce back. It will probably warm up. I think in November we could be talking about some fairly warm weather back in the eastern half of the United States and also Western Europe, as the PNA and the NAO and the AO all start to reverse. So yes, we're going to see a cold end October for not only Eastern North America but Western Europe. It will reverse. So people will be laid back into that false sense of security, thinking that winter is just going to be warm, like a large part of last winter was, of course. So hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you haven't already done so, check out markvoganweather.com to find out more information. Bye for now.